So this is the topic, importance of blockchain technology and its applications in the agriculture. Okay. Now let me tell briefly about our organization. Center for Development of Advanced Computing is a scientific society under Ministry of Electronics and IT, Government of India. So we are located across India, and these are all the centers where the CDAC offices are there, and our headquarters is located at Pune. And at Hyderabad, we are near Semshabad Airport in the Hardware Park. So we are around 150 employees, and we work in the various the state-of-art technologies, the blockchain, the cyber security, embedded systems, and IoT. We also do a lot of work in ICT for social development. So, and also we do skill-based training and other things. These are the core strengths of the Hyderabad. So coming to this, actually, like I just thought, okay, to establish some connect to this session, we just planned some kind of the initial why actually we need to look for digital technologies in agriculture. I think this is something which you are all aware and you are all doing, but I thought, okay, maybe some for connection, I thought I'll try to bring it out. So global population projected to grow from 7.6 billion in 2018 to almost 9.6 billion in 2050. And as per the projection, significant increase in the demand for food. But the problem is with the availability of natural resources, fresh water, and the productive arable land. That is basically the increasingly constrained in that particular thing. So becomes relevant to upscale or upgrade and modify the agriculture sector. So for that, if you look at it with Industry 4.0, several sectors, manufacturing and other things, they're already transformed by disruptive digital technologies. So people are exploiting these technologies in the various sectors. So coming to the agriculture, if you look at it, if you look at the digital agriculture revolution in agriculture and food sector, so already we are utilizing the mobile technologies, remote sensing services, internet and social media, where the small stakeholders have access to the information, inputs, market finance and training. People are able to get the details. So through SMS, the market, the value and other things, they'll get it easily. And opportunities to integrate smallholders in a digitally driven agri-food system. Also support for agri-entrepreneurial innovation culture. Okay, so people are already, you are all using it, these kind of things. So people are utilizing these kind of things, the digital agriculture revolution. So coming to the adoption of digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, ML, IoT, cloud and blockchain. So a lot of things can happen, like agri-food chains can be traceable and can be coordinated at the granular level. We will understand how it can be done by using the technologies. So we can do the traceability and of the supply chains, and so that we can maintain the quality and try to overcome or detect the frauds happening in these supply chains. And also management of resources throughout the system. So real time and optimized, individualized, intelligent and proactive way. So driven by the data. Okay, so that is AI techniques and other things. At the field level, at the physical systems level, we can capture the various parameters through the IoT. Once we have the data available with you, then actually we can do a lot of analysis on top of it, and then we can derive some kind of intelligent algorithms and which can be applied so that we can manage the resources efficiently throughout the system. Okay, so now this is something which we'll try to focus. So before going further, actually what I'll do is first I will try to focus on the importance of the technology blockchain, because if you look at what are the applications areas for the agri and other things, you are the right people to decide on that particular thing. So what we'll tell is the potential benefits of the technology and what kind of value addition the technology will bring. And also we'll try to focus on some of the case studies which we applied for the other sector. So this definitely helps you to map it to the agriculture sector. Okay. So now before we go to the blockchain, okay. So now let us try to understand how is actually trust built. Okay. So blockchain is something which is very much connected with the trust, the way trust is built into the system. So now we are using the various online services. See, now we are all aware in access to the banking service. We are aware about the property registration systems. Okay, so many systems we are using, some education systems in the schools and other things like that. If you look at it, in all these applications, in order to carry out the transactions, we have trusted intermediate people who are enabled. Okay, like for example, in the bank is something a trusted party. So whenever you want to have some kind of transactions happening across the different stakeholders of society, The bank is identified a trusted party or middleman, like who are going to verify the identity in the transaction. So now they will verify the identity of the people involved in the transaction and the details, and they are involved in the clearing and settling of transactions, and they maintain the records of the transaction. So there is a like that. If you look at for land property registration, we have SRO who is trying to do that kind of thing. So they are establishing the trust, and then these other things happen. They'll verify the identity of the people or the stakeholders involved in the transaction, and then they do the once the identity is verified and based on their values and other things, they'll carry out the clearing and settling of transactions, and later they'll try to maintain the record of transactions. Now the idea of the trust protocol is that trying to avoid the middlemen or the trusted parties or intermediaries. So what the trust protocol talks about is that we need to have a layer created on top of our network by using the various technologies. So we are very much aware of the internet protocols, right? So I think with the World Wide Web and the internet protocol, within no time, we are able to access the various resources. But still, when these banks are enabling on mode, again, there also we have trusted entities through their logins, they'll try to enter and they'll try to carry out the activities. So there is a role of a intermediaries even in our the virtual world. The idea of trust protocol is to create some kind of collaboration using the technologies by creating a layer of technologies on top of the network so that the trust can be built through the network rather than depending on the middleman. So for that, actually, we depend on the various latest technologies, amalgamation of various technologies like distributed systems, consensus protocols, and then we depend on cryptography, and then something called smart contracts. Okay, all these things are put together, and then the trusted protocols are built, where the idea is moving from the middlemen or intermediaries through a layer created through a software on top of the networks itself. So it's not one entity or one node is trying to maintain a centralized node, whereas every node is equally participative in enabling the trust. So collaborative, massive collaboration across the nodes is going to enable the trust. So that is something called as trust protocol. And if you look at the evolution of the trust, in the olden days and nomad days, actually what happened is trust is built by looking at the facial gestures and other things like that. So across the people. So that's how you try to analyze the behavior, and then based on that you identify what is the level of risk and how much trust I can build with that particular entity. So that is how the kind of trust was built. Later, so when the man progressed, actually, we brought this institutional mechanism of trust, where actually we have a trusted parties governed by the entities, various entities, government. Such things are created like banks, schools. Okay, all these kind of things are created. So where they are trying to enable a layer of trust. And then now what we are trying to talk about is the programmable trust over our networks rather than institutional mechanism. We want that layer to be created through the software which is built on top of our kind of things. Okay. Now that's where the future, what we are trying to look at is the kind of the blockchain. Okay. So which is basically enabling a trust layer through a software layer created on top of our network. Okay, so we are avoiding or we are moving from the institutional or intermediate trusted parties towards the trust enabled through the software over the network. So uh, blockchain is one such a technology. It's not that, okay, this is the only kind of thing, trust the protocol. It's a one such technology. So where cryptographically secure distributed ledger. So what happens is that, as I mentioned that now the ledger, whatever it is, see now if you look at it in any kind of environment, okay, so whether you talk about banks, schools, or even hotel management or anything you talk about, or land records application, so trusted parties maintain ledgers. Ledgers give the sequence of activities or transactions which are taken place, so that you can try to verify the later point of time, how the events happened, how the property has moved from one party to the other, how the bank transactions happened. Everything is maintained through that. Whereas now what we are talking about with the blockchain is that cryptographically secured means these are the mathematical functions. Cryptographic algorithms are mathematical functions which help us to secure the data over the network. So by using this cryptographically secured, we are trying to maintain a distributed ledger, where ledger is not just maintained at a single place. Like if you look at this diagram, earlier we were depending on like this central bank and in banks branch offices, and they, in turn, the stakeholders will approach the banks and other things like that. Okay. So whereas now if you talk about this distributed technology, the cryptographically distributed secure distributed ledger is maintained, and the entities are going to interact through the network. Okay. And this ledger keeps track of the status. Okay. And people cannot tamper that. Fine. So that is arrived by through the distributed protocols, consensus, and other things. So fault tolerance, and then all the nodes agreeing to a common state. Such protocols are available, which are matured. And by using those protocols, and then on top of it, by using the cryptographic algorithms, we will be able to maintain a cryptographically secure distributed ledger, which records transactions in a time sequenced manner permanently and unalterably. No one will go and modify that. That is the beauty of these kind of things. Okay, in a time sequenced manner, we will try to store it so that people will not go and modify. Whether when you have a centralized entity, authorized body who is doing all that, they will have the control in the existing databases. They will have the control that they may do some kind of tampering. Whereas here, the technologies provide an inbuilt support so that it cannot be altered and it is permanent. So here you may ask some questions. Suppose I made a transaction, but what happens is that is a fault thing, which it's a mistake from my end. So you can correct it through another thing, so that audit trail exists in that you try to do some things and then later you try to correct that particular thing. Okay. So a decentralized computation and information sharing platform, and then consensus based recording and trust enabled through technologies. This is what is exactly the blockchain. And here I will try to tell you one more thing. Here at each node, when the ledger is maintained, so it is maintained like this. You can see the diagram. So it's a blockchain means all the transactions will be going to the blocks, and the blocks are linked. So transactions will be placed, and in a integrity of each block is captured. So that what happens is when we move from one block to the other, so what happens is that there actually, like if someone tries to tamper, you may say that someone can go and try to update the transaction. That is not possible, because the integrity across the blocks and within the block, all these things are properly maintained through the cryptographic algorithms. And if anyone tries to change that one node, it's very difficult to carry out across all the nodes, because the same copy is maintained. So another advantage is if one node is corrupted, you can easily try to get it back from the other nodes of the network. Okay. So this is the way. It is basically the technology which is trying to enable the trust. So we should not assume that, okay, blockchain means all problems will be solved. We should be very clear what are the problems which can be in agriculture, which can be solved through this technology. Okay, we have to look at that kind of. Okay, so this so client initiates the transactions. When clients initiate the transactions, now what happened? All the nodes in that network will try to verify, because they have the history of the previous transactions. Once they are all verified, once it is done, the verification and validation is done, then the node will get added to the blockchain, and this gets created, or it is maintained across all the nodes in the network. Okay, so this is the way it is done. So it's not that some centralized entity alone will be involved in this kind of. So the value proposition of going for a blockchain is that, with the technology, is that, so immutability, permanent record keeping, people cannot go and modify that. Second one is the transparency. So it is distributed across all the designated the nodes of the parties and all, so that it will be able to access in the real time. Transparency is maintained. So enables and automate trust through cryptographically, because we trust this kind of cryptographic mechanism which are mathematically proven. So that like we'll be able to trust that kind of thing, so that no changes and all happen in that. Track and trace, the reason is, once you have the things in sequence maintained on all the details about the various assets and all transactions on in the blockchain in a time sequence manner, you'll be able to track and trace the various activities corresponding to that. So able to prove that the information is intact and not altered at any instance of time. Okay, so the data integrity is done. That's again because of the mathematical functions and all. And then highly resilient distributed network with multiple shared copies of the data. So we are trying to maintain across the various nodes of it. Okay, this is the value proposition of going for a integrating blockchain to the network. So what is the advantage, like especially when you talk about the government organizations or anything, why do we want to go in our domain? One is the building trust. Okay, so the blockchain is going to be the single source of truth, where all the details about the transactions are stored, which is secured with the high-end mathematical functions which can be trusted. Okay, so that's the kind of thing in that. Okay, so which because of distributed, it is improves the transparency and accountability. And since sometimes with the middlemen and other things, there can be some kind of uh, time gaps and all, whereas it is happening in the real time over the network, so speeds up the transactions, and you can protect the sensitive data, and it reduces the cost and improves the efficiency of the system. Okay, overall, fine. So this is the value proposition of going. These are some of the predictions. I will just rush through this. I think may not be, you may be aware. So just gives that Gartner predictions that so $176 billion business by 2025 and almost $3.1 trillion dollar by 2030. So this is the kind in which and this talks about the sectors also, various sectors: manufacturing, banking, communication, public, government. When we talk about, we can have invest in various healthcare, even education, even the agri and other things, transportation, all these kind of things. So now the thing is, okay, we got some understanding about the technology. What is, where do we use it? Like now, okay. So what is that? We have different assets. It can be anything. It can be a land. It can be a food product, or it can be a seed. When we talk about an agri, okay. So it can be a house or a car. These are all the tangible things. Otherwise, intangible like intellectual property, such as patents, copyright, or branding. So anything, any asset with it can be a tangible or intangible. The entire life cycle of that particular thing can be recorded onto the transactions, and all these things we can try to maintain on the blockchain. Okay, so facilitates the process of recording the transactions and tracking the assets. All this we can try to put it on the blockchain. So anything of value can be tracked and traded. So reducing the risk and cutting the cost. And so it is enables the verifiability and tamper evidence. Okay, so that's a tamper proof and tamper evidence and verifiability. Audit trail is available. Okay, we need not, for complaints, regulatory complaints and other things, we need not maintain separate files, and where you pull the records from all the departments. When the audit team comes, you present all the audit details in front of the audit team. It's not like that. Now when you have all the systems, all the departments for a specific problem or a specific objective, when they are trying to interact through the blockchain, automatically audit trail is created on the blockchain, which becomes very easy during the auditing process or regulatory complaints also. So this is the advantage of going for this kind of things. So this I discussed already. Government, we look at it, building trust with citizens, improves transparency, accountability, speeds of transactions. So protecting sensitive data, reducing cost, and improving the efficiency. So what are the potential asset registry? You can keep track of the assets or land records or whatever it is. We can keep track of that. Smart contracts, like arriving at the agreements across the various entities for carrying out the transactions and all. You can try to maintain over the blockchain. This we will discuss more. Identity management, healthcare, education, public transport, agri and food product supply chain, logistics, payments, voting, collaboration platforms. All these are the potential the applications. Okay, so right now we are doing one voting application with Telangana government, so which is on a dry run, started from today. You would have seen in some of the papers. So just we try to use this technology for the voting purpose. So earlier we have done some work in the even the land records and other things. So like there are global scenario also. China is working on a blockchain based service network, blockchain based identification system, data sharing between the various smart cities and other things like that. So like that. Okay, so you can go through that. I'll share the slides later. So Dubai is looking at something like smart Dubai, where they want every office record to be available on blockchain by 2022, like that. European countries, for the cross country activities and other things, they're looking for a blockchain service infrastructure. So it becomes easier to track and track the various activities. Okay, Australian blockchain, national blockchain, they're focusing heavily on standardizing the efforts and all. So Australia industry is also funding for the identified applications and provide the expert services. Okay, Slovakia is also aggressively moving for the blockchain. Estonia integrates for the healthcare, okay, judiciary and other things like that. So Dutch, even UK for enhance the food traceability, land records, and even Ghana also, like Ghana also for land records. US is also using for specific use cases in food and other things. Okay, Israel also has got their own blockchain association. Like that, every country is involved in trying to use it in the potential domains to take the benefit of its traceability, verifiability aspects of the technology. In our country, if you look at it, This is something captured in 2019 or sometime. Like for example, Andhra Pradesh blockchain database, they are trying to cyber security, healthcare, land registry, vehicle title registration. Okay. So similarly, if you look at it, Gujarat looks at fertilizer subsidy management, e-governance. Karnataka is exploring for agriculture, digital certificate. Okay. So like this, farm insurance by Kerala, agriculture supply chain, the Kerala, like that. Okay. So these are some of the things. Every state has identified about importance of this technology and started using in some specific use cases. So out of all that, if you look at the top use cases, one is the land registry, farm insurance, and digital certificates. These are the top 3 use cases used by the different states in our country. So what I will do is that next 5 minutes or 10 minutes, what I will do is I'll try to focus on the kind of potential application which we have done. This helps you to to understand that importance of this particular technology. Okay. One thing what we have taken is the property registration. I think every one of us is aware that across the globe, not only in our state or in our country like that, across the globe is a challenge, property registration management, where we keep listening to the potential challenges. Okay. Double registrations from the news articles and all, we keep listening to all these kind of things. Double registration, or sometimes producing fake documents for registration. So fake CLD documents are created, because what happens when we approach the SRO ultimately carries out the registration based on the papers which are submitted. If someone tries to generate, sometimes it go unnoticed and then the property transactions and all will happen. Or sometimes what happen is, from the known channel, from a trusted parties identified by the government, they themselves will involve in the modification of the database. They leads to displaying unreliable encumbrance and other things with the modified details. Okay. So now these are the potential challenges. So that's why what we thought is maybe we can try to explore, because what happens is, one advantage with the blockchain technology is that in a time sequenced manner, in a tamper proof and verifiable way, we are trying to store the records. So definitely we can think about eradicating this double registration, because in a time sequence manner, we have the sequence of activities and fake documents also. Once we have a fake CLD document generated, and if you try to store its integrity value on the blockchain, and at a later point of time, we'll be able to verify whether the CLD document is original or it is a fake one. And also, though the database modifications are done by the trusted person identified by the government, the blockchain details, whichever are available when we try to push all the transaction details, though they modify in the database, it's not possible to tamper the data, the blockchain, because blockchain is basically an append-only database. Okay, what does it mean is, I cannot go and try to write somewhere in the middle. Okay, I can keep appending the things, so any even trusted party cannot do any changes in the kind of thing. So from all these things, what is required is, if you look for a ledger which is required for a blockchain, is something like we should have a reliable, time-stamped, tamper evident, and providing non-repudiable proof for each transaction. Somewhere at a later point of time, with a court or third party, some entity, we should be able to prove that yes, this transaction has really happened at this point of time. Just like the way we have in the signatures in the physical world, whatever we use, here along with the digital signatures and which are put on the blockchain, they'll be able to help us to try to identify whether really transaction taken place at specific time. And even title history also, when a citizen want to buy particular property or something like that, there most of the time they have to spend lot of time investigating and identifying from different parties about the owner details and all. Whereas once you change them all the transactions in a tamper evident manner on the blockchain, then people cannot modify that. Okay, so that is the implicit nature of the blockchain. So automatically the linked documents will get created, the title history from the blockchain itself. So now when the government gives it for citizens to enables the interface for citizens to access the encumbrance and other things like that. Now instead of giving the details from the documents given from the database, instead of that, if all the transactions are enabled on the blockchain and that interface is, then it is the citizens have more trust on the government, because it's a technology which is implicitly enabling that kind of behavior. And also because of the distributed nature, we can avoid single point of failure. And because of the distributed other things, in case of failure, data can be recoverable from other. Whereas if it is centralized, sometimes it can be corrupted and all. So these are the typically the desired features of the land records, and all these things are implicitly provided by the blockchain. So what we have done is this kind of system we have created, where we are see that in a land records, typically this is a process involved. We have not modified any of the process. We are going ahead as per the process defined by the government. But only thing is, in the various workflow, the crucial steps which are important to be safeguarded, all the transactions related to the property, along with the database, we are check slip generation and regular document generation, all these things, along with the database, we are trying to push them onto the blockchain. So these transactions, once you try to push them onto the blockchain, okay, so what happens is that at a later point of time, this blockchain will provide an interface to the SRO also at a later point. When someone approaches with the papers, he can try to verify from the blockchain. That's one benefit. And we can even enable the encumbrance search to the citizen so that he can get the details from the blockchain. Okay. And we have implemented the blockchain in as two ledgers. One is all the transactions involved in the change of ownership from one person to the other. They all will go into the PRMS ledger, from where actually the encumbrance and other things are, the interface is enabled. Along with that, we also have a proof of existence ledger. What is that? All the SailD documents, the regular document, whatever is generated, its integrity and other things will be maintained here. So at any point of time, whenever a document is received, we'll be able to verify that particular thing from the POE. Okay. So this is the way system is defined, and the buyer and seller, when they approach the SRO with the papers, this is the original flow. What happens? Generating check slip, regular document, storing in the local database. We have enabled this system, okay, along with the government, where we are maintaining the details from the blockchain. And this helps all the departments also to get the details directly from the blockchain. And even SRO also can verify the details through this. Okay, so it's an extended system so that you can quickly adopt the emerging technology in the workflow, rather than thinking about creating altogether a new system from the scratch, because that definitely takes more time, and the adaptability rate also is less compared to the integrating. Now the interface part is not changed. Only thing is we have extended that particular thing in the back end, taking the benefit of the technology. So this is the some of the innovation and novelties, like title ownership verification is doing not just papers, and addressing internal attacks. People, if they do database modification, they cannot tamper with the blockchain. Encumbrance search is not manual or look at the documents, but it is automated from the chain. It will come. Database is not centralized, distributed. Double registration and fake document kind of thing can be detected here. One is the because of the transactions are stored in a time sequence, and also we are SailD document integrity is protected on the POE. Smart contracts for registration you can build. See, right now, though we are not enabled directly, okay, so we can have a contract created across the vendor and vendee or the chain itself. But for that, the regulatory aspects and all need to be brought into picture. It changed actually. So otherwise, we can enable directly the registration also with this kind of system. And anywhere, they need not be going to a specific SRO and do that physically. It can happen from anywhere for a specific property in the online mode. Okay. So this is something like talks about some of the awards which we received, Scotch, and also in the Asia Pacific region is one of the finalists for Gartner AI Innovation Award in Governance in 2020, and also like see this is one of the ISO internationally. This use case is for land records is included, presented during the 6th plenary, and this is going to be published in the next 2 months period. Okay, so this will be part of the use case document actually. So as I was talking about the proof of existence also, like see now we keep hearing to the weather thing like fraud with respect to fake degree certificate, fake property records, like that. Various digital artifacts, people are generate the fake documents and then are trying to carry out the frauds. Okay, but see what happens, whatever the document management systems which we are using with the present databases, the transparency, security, and efficiency is the problem. Okay, so like see, we don't have a mechanism where temporal existence, verify the origin, okay, time at which they are created, whether we are trying to check that, verify the origin who has already done it, and content authenticity. So those things are not properly taken care. Okay, so through a trusted party we are trying to depend, but there are a lot of things can happen through the attacks, or it can be the intentional activities. So for that, what we have done is whether we can try to have a system where we can record the details, hash of the digital artifact. Hash is means something like a fingerprint of that particular thing. Time stamping along with the digital signature, whether we can try to put it onto the blockchain. It can be any document, proof of existence of any document. It can be license document, it can be a sale deed document, it can be a digital student education certificate. Okay, so all these kind of things. So so that once they are put on the blockchain, so that it will allow verification at a later point of time, because we are putting on the blockchain hash value, it cannot be tampered. So so digital artifact existed at a point in time when it was recorded on the blockchain, so that can be verified at a later point. Okay, so once what we do is we can record, generate the hash and store it, and you'll be getting a receipt actually which contains the hash and other things along with the document. When you try to submit that, will verify whether it is existing the same one or not. So like that you can look at the potential areas. Okay, so lot of areas you can try to map it to your own domain where actually that some kind of challenges you people are facing. So we'll talk about birth certificate. I think the time is too short. Again, Mahesh also has to speak. I'll just so hope I think I could convey the message about the importance of the technology. So like a birth certificate, death certificate, people may try to tamper, employee service records, MOUs agreements, exam results and student certificates, log management, sale deed and land records, health records, okay, driving licenses, like that. It's not limited to these things. We can have the various things, intellectual property, whatever is generated, patent details, like that. All these kind of things we can try to put it onto the proof of existence blockchain. So over the period, actually, like though various the applications are created, the basic challenge is most of them are in the pilot or POC stage. Okay, if you look at it, 92% are in the pilot, and whereas only 8% have really gone to the field deployment. Okay, and the major the things which have gone beyond uh, pilot is land records, education certificate, cheat fund management, drug supply chain, insurance fee kind of thing. Okay, so but there is the potential. Only problem is, see, these are all done in silos. If you want to have really have a national level adoption of this technology in a very productive manner, working in silos or having the chain separately may not be able to help. But what we need to do is that, so we are right now in the pilot phase. Okay, to have a adoption strategy, we need to move from the present pilot this thing to large scale adoptions where we can think about a common shared infrastructure for blockchain, so that cross domain applications and all can access. Because most of the time we cannot say, okay, I built something for blockchain, I may need to have the data exchange with other system. So that kind of infrastructure we need to enable. So for that, actually, to have these kind of things, we need to think about national level a framework for large scale adoption, which government of India is currently working on. So we expect this to be enabled in the next 1 year period, and we can onboard various applications. Okay, so every government department can come out with their challenging applications, and you can tell us, okay, these are some things where we can definitely feed that the blockchain is going to give a benefit, and you can work with us or other government. We can also extend the support for this kind of things, so that we can work together and see that so how we can try to enable some benefits, value addition of this blockchain for your domain applications. Okay, so that technology stack with the open APIs can be enabled with the blockchain, because everyone need not worry about understanding the technology entire stack and all. So once you have the open APIs and all, you can try to build this kind of application. This is something which is happening, and definitely we can say that next 6 months, first level will come out, and maybe we can start interacting in that direction also. So easy integration with existing service, because DigiLocker, all these things are important now. Everywhere we need to have a traceability and tamper evident and other kind of things. Interoperability across the deployed application, performance of smart contract scalability, security for sensitive information. Okay, so now with all these kind of things, there is a national unified blockchain framework is being built. You can look at it. I'm just mentioned, we are just mentioning these are stack where the efforts are being made. Okay, and you look at it, any development, education, governance, supply chain. Supply chain can be anything, agri supply chain, food supply chain, any kind of thing. Public distribution system, health, all these kind of applications, they should be able to use the open APIs and try to build the things. Okay, this is the vision of government of India in this particular direction. And coming to this agri supply chain, if you look at it, I will just take another 5 minutes. Okay. So generally what we see most of the time, I think you are having the better picture. This is something which from literature I try to correct and try to map it where we can try to use it. So corruption among the middlemen. Okay. Lack of transparency in the whole chain as goods transit through the chain. Okay. So lack of accountability on the part of all stakeholders involved, waste of produce. Okay. So sometimes in the supply chain, the produce may not reach and most of these will get wasted. So because of not having timely real-time information and other things like that. And when the details move from one to the other also, there can be some tampering happening. The integrity of the details across the supply and real-time access may be the problem. There can be delays and all. So less income generation by farmers because though the lot of efforts are made, finally because of the other aspects, the income generated by the farmer will be less. And farmer insurance related issues also normally we face. Okay. So if you look at the seed company supply chain, generally like these are all the various phases. Okay. So there can be a lot of things like delays, some kind of tampering or fraud happening at some kind of phases where you end up with fake seeds or something like that. So finally, that's how the end market product may be of less quality, and the people who have really worked and generated, they end up with some kind of challenges. So whether we can have the blockchain technology used for these kind of things, where you can have a track of the supply chain of this. So there is some paper which I was referring to, blockchain-based soybean traceability in agriculture. So like see, if you have all these things, if you build the kind of smart contracts, see contracts is something like kind of how the different stakeholders interact or involve in the transactions. See, now every seed company has a specific involvement, okay, with the system. If you look at the supply chain of the soybean traceability, like what happened, seed company or the farmer or distributor, retailer, grain processor, customer, the grain elevator, all each and every entity has got a role to play in this. Okay, so like create contract and buy the seeds, sell crop to elevator. These are the way the farmer will try to interact with this particular system. When you talk about grain processor, they'll buy grain from the elevator. Seed company will sell the seeds. Okay, so like that, if you look at it, each stakeholder has got a specific way in which you are trying to interact. So that is the kind of transactions they're going to. So if we can try to define those transactions, automate those kind of things, encode them on top of the blockchains as smart contracts, so that things will happen automatically, so that the manual involvement or intermediary role may not come into picture. If we design such systems, then with the product actually enabled with the QR code, with the proper things and other things, at each stage properly tracking and enabling all the aspects about the product. If you have the entire system built in, then we can try to avoid the traceable where we can trace the things and tamper proofing and all will be enabled. Okay, and also like update crop growth, the quality, and all other details whatever are happening, we can have the details stored on a distributed file system also. Okay, okay, on top of it we can store the in the chain, and other details we can even store in the distributed file system. Okay, so this is one example where a tamper evidence is tamper proofing is created across the interactions between the various entities, okay, in this particular the supply chain. Not that, okay, it is the integrity at one point, but integrity across the food chain or supply chain. That is something which is the important. And you can asset or something, you can code some value like a QR code and other things can be used to identify the specific asset, and then you can try to build that. Another important thing which I would like to tell is that, because see, if we try to adopt any new technology without trying to understand the value addition, see what happens is it's not that this technology is going to solve every problem. So this will help us in basically traceability aspects, and then you can have a tamper proofing of the different activities. Okay, and you can have some kind of proof of existence of something like that. If wherever you are facing challenges specific to the agriculture, where you have the problems in that direction, then you can try to look at it. So what the benefit the blockchain is giving is something like it gives single source of truth. The chain will give about the state of the inventory, farm, and contracts. Blockchain can provide traceable and transparent data on food origin at each stage of the supply chain. So once the details are available on the blockchain, real time you can directly get the details, and detects poor quality of products in the chains. You can trace where exactly the problem happened and other things like that. And this also helps in your regulatory compliance also. Once you have the things, it becomes easier for the regulatory compliance of your product. Consumers get information on the origin of the food. Producers can mark seeds and products with the appropriate QR codes for unique detection. Delivery companies carry products to retailers selves. Okay, the entire thing in the up to the retailers and other things. So generally, if you look at it, all these technologies, cloud is something a backend store for the large data. Okay, generally we try to use for that particular thing. So if you have a cloud enabled with blockchain as secure storage, no, that helps in traceability and the verifiability aspects. Okay, and tamper proofing of the data, blockchain enabled cloud kind of thing. And IoT, as you are aware, real time you'll try to capture like farm in the precision agriculture, you try to capture the various parameters. Based on that, once you have the data captured through the IoT, we have the AI as acting like a brain, will trying to generate some intelligence, and blockchain helps us to store all the details in a time sequence manner. Okay, so all these together are going to help a lot generate use it in a plenty of use cases. But you are the right decision maker in trying to look at what's the value addition by going for the technology, because that kind of analysis between the domain people and IT experts is very, very crucial. Again, we just end up in using a technology without a purpose, and sometimes it may be taking because the investment may be too high also. Well, cost benefit analysis is also very, very important. Sometimes we may try to do some kind of POC, but later we find that it may be very difficult in trying to deploy in the large scale. So all these aspects we have to look at it, and accordingly we try to choose the right use case for this particular thing. So if you have any use case, once the unified blockchain framework, which the government of India is working, we can work together and identify very, very crucial things which are of national importance. We can try to look at such kind of such use cases in the agri and food chain, which are going to help for the country. We can work with you in this particular direction. So this in brief, which you can explore something on IBM Food Trust also. Because of lack of time, I don't want to. They have some solution. You can get some idea in this particular direction. So this is in brief about what I want to convey with respect to the blockchain. So request Mahesh to continue, and maybe you can have some questions also later.
Very good afternoon to everybody. So I would talk about machine learning, and I would also try to highlight how effectively people use machine learning in agriculture domain. Apart from that, I have few demos which would make it a little evident that how machine learning is more important assessment. So just to start off, I hope you are able to see the screen. So if you look at the traditional mechanism of computing, this is how it works actually. So we typically give data. It could be like, for example, temperature data, humidity data, soil moisture data, that kind of data we collect from the field, and then we write a program. And based on the data, this program would actually run an algorithm onto a computer and generate some output for us, which could be a decision system telling us that, okay, with this temperature and this humidity, there is a chance that maybe like there could be a pest that can be infected onto the crop, that kind of thing. So this is what is the traditional way of computing. But what machine learning does to the data is slightly different actually. If you look at it, in machine learning, what you do is to the computer, you feed the data and also train it, telling that this is what is the data all about. With this kind of input, it will generate a program for you or a machine learning model for you. So you see that initially we used to write the programs, but now the machine itself is generating a program. And you are giving the input and the relevant output to that particular input as a input to this computer program. Now, what happens with this is, if once this model is generated, you can actually feed in some data which you don't know about anything about it, right? So, based on these training data which you have given, it would try to predict that, okay, this data could be a specific data which you are actually looking for. So it's more about feeding the data to the computer, getting a model out of it, and then giving unknown data to it. So this is the unknown data, and then it will try to predict, okay, what kind of data you have fed in it. So I'll give you good examples of it to make it much more clear. But that's what is the paradigm shift actually. Just assume that you have never seen an apple, okay? And if someone shows you this picture, you can actually grasp that, okay, there are apples which are of different shapes and slightly different color, a little bit of texture is also different. And the way the stem comes out of this fruit is also a little different actually. And then if I show you another set of fruits or vegetables like tomatoes, you can see that, okay, you can also grasp visually and then you extract certain details about this in terms of colors, maybe shape, and the way the leaves are and things like that. And then suppose I show you this picture and I tell you, can you predict what is this? Is it an apple or is it a tomato? And there could be a more likely answer that you would say that this is an apple. Now, how did we actually judge that this is an apple? In fact, we actually did a machine learning algorithm uh, in our brain and then try to like predict that this is an apple. So more formally, it looks something like this. And same thing is followed in machine learning as well. So if you look at it, you can actually give a set of data to the machine learning algorithms, wherein you actually have text, documents, or images, or even audio files as inputs to it, and you extract the feature. Now, if you look at it, when you looked at an apple, you could have looked at the shape of the apple, as I said, all or the size of it, all that are nothing but features actually. So we call them as feature vectors. And the same thing happens in machine learning also. What happens is you actually get this unstructured data and extract features from it. And with this feature, you also attach something called as a label. Now, for an apple, I would have one set of features, F1, F2 to Fn, and maybe the same features for an tomato would be different. So it could be features could be like size, the weight of it, the way the stem looks like, the color of it. So all those are like features. So you collect all this data and give it as an input to the machine learning algorithm. So this is typically called as supervised machine learning because we are also telling that the input which we are giving is for an apple. The input which we are giving is for an tomato. So that's why we are supervising the learning model. With this inputs to the machine learning algorithm, it will generate one model, which we call it as the predictive model. Now, with this predictive model, what would happen is if you suppose this is an image which you have actually trained for. If you show an image of apple to the machine learning algorithm, it will be able to predict that the output is nothing but an apple.
Uh, so what I would do is I'll just discuss about the machine learning types and show some demos. So if you see, there are two types of machine learning algorithms. One is called as the unsupervised learning, and second is called as the supervised learning. So the example which I showed you was for supervised learning. And with supervised learning, you can achieve two things. One is nothing but classification. Uh, Suppose I show a rotten mango and a ripened mango. So it will be able to classify that which one is a rotten mango, which one is a good mango, kind of thing. Regression is mainly on a continuous value. So typically, like for example, you want to predict in October what is the specific temperature and humidity value in a particular region based on some historical data. So you would be able to do that even with machine learning algorithms, and they are typically called as regression algorithms. So they typically deal with continuous values. Apart from that, you have unsupervised learning, wherein you don't know about the data much, right? So typically in unsupervised learning, you don't have labels for the. It would actually take the information and then do the clustering for you, right? So which would help you to analyze further the data much easily. Just to give you a feeling of what it means, is something like this. So for example, here I have some data uh, which is like I have trained it with apples and maybe oranges. And if I actually show it an apple, it would actually be able to say that this is an apple or an orange. On the other side, in unsupervised learning, where you don't have any information about this data, it will try to cluster it into two halves. It will make this as one cluster and this as another cluster, kind of thing. And as I mentioned about the regression, what would happen is you would actually try to measure a continuous value, which would help you to predict certain details like temperature, humidity in a specific like time zone, actually, right? So let me just start with a tool. This is an open source tool which you can also download it. It's called as Orange, and it is very good in terms of providing like exploratory analysis of data. So what we'll do is we'll just paint some data. So we don't have. So we are just generating some fake data. So right now I'm just creating some data at this point and at this point, right? So that is the data which we would like to feed it to a machine learning algorithm, which is unsupervised learning. So K-means is one of the popular unsupervised learning algorithm. And I'm saying that can you find two clusters in this data, right? So with this, let us see that what is the output it generates. So this is the output. So you see that it could very cleanly classify these two data, uh, not really classify, but cluster two data, so that we can actually analyze that, okay, this is one set of data that is there, and this is another set of data that is. Now this X and Y axis could be anything. It could be like, suppose the size of the mango, the height and width of a mango. Now I can actually categorize that there are two kinds of mangoes in my field, actually, if I have this data in hand, actually, right? Same way, what may happen is I can actually sometimes also increase the number of clusters to analyze for. So let's see that what the machine learning algorithms. So you see that now it has put in into three clusters. One is this red cluster over here. The second one is the blue cluster, and just on the right hand side there is a green cluster. So it has classified maybe the data into three different clusters, by which now I can make some more decisions in a better way. So maybe if this mangoes are little bigger in size, I can actually sell it for more cost as compared to the smaller mangoes as such. So this is like an example of an unsupervised learning. You can also explore many other things here. It supports almost all the major algorithms as such, both supervised and unsupervised learning algorithms. But even beyond that, let us go and look at one more demo. Let me just even classify that some use cases where you can use classification, regression, and clustering. So classification, for example, can be used for rotten mangoes versus good mangoes. I want to classify whether a given mango is good or if it's a rotten mango. Regression, as I mentioned, a prediction of temperature and humidity. And clustering may help you that if a drone flies over a particular field, you can actually look at the color of the leaves and then cluster it and give this as an input to the machine learning algorithm to say that, okay, this part of the field might be infested with infected with pests, right? And there are many other uses of AI where people have actually taken in to even develop chatbots for farmers to answer some of the questions they have, to even doing forecasting, as I mentioned, or pest control kind of thing. And agriculture robot is one of the very interesting features wherein a robot moves around in the field and then picks up only the ripened strawberries. Okay, this was one very good use case people have used machine learning for, actually. Let me actually talk about this website, and we'll try to develop a very simple model. So here's an website where you can visit. It is called as Teachable Machines, and we'll do a small project over here to see that how easy things are to do in machine learning. So we'll do an image project and we'll do a standard image model, and you see that we have two classes here. So the idea over here is I have a set of good papayas. So you see that I have collected some papaya images from the Google Play Store. Sorry, the Google search engine, and then you see that some of these are like uh, rotten ones, some of them are good ones, right? So here are the rotten ones. So I have two directories, one for the rotten papayas and the second for the good papayas, right? So what we'll do is we will feed this as first class, saying that it is good papayas, and the second one as rotten papayas, and we'll upload the folder which contains this information. So I'll take the good papayas, just take the images and upload them, and I'll do the same thing for the rotten papayas. So what I'm doing here is I'm just uploading the images of rotten and good. So this is supervised learning, obviously, because I am actually saying that this is good papaya pictures and these are good rotten papaya pictures. After that, what we'll have to do is we have to train the model. So it will take a little while in training, but essentially what is happening over here is you are telling the machine learning model, take these images which are of good papayas and rotten papayas, extract the features from it, and then give me a model. So now your model is ready. It is uh, ready for usage. So let's use it with a file. So what I've done is I also have apart from these two, some test data here for some rotten and some good papayas. So let's go and upload the test data. So this is one image, and it looks like it is a good papaya. And let's see what the. So here you see that the model has failed a little bit. 25% of it is saying that it is a good papaya, 75% it is saying that it's a rotten, and that could be reason because if you see over here, it has a texture a little bit of a rotten papaya also. So let's take the next one. Here it looks like uh, it is a rotten papaya. So if you see here, there is a small, so there could be a chance that this model is not trained properly. So let's increase the epoch size and also the batch size. Let the batch size be there. Let's train it once again. Okay, looks good. Let's apply it on the file. So let's upload. Yeah, now you see that the model is, so you'll have to actually tune the model. This is called as hyperparameter tuning for the model. So you see that now it's like able to probably give a better answer. Let's go and, so you see that here it is 100% saying that it's a rotten papaya because it really is a rotten papaya. Let's take this one, and even in this second case it's saying that it is a rotten papaya for 100% out there. So it looks like the model is working, and you see that here it is now saying that it's a good papaya, and it is slightly saying that it might be rotten for some 5% because of maybe this small part of the papaya which it is assuming that it is rotten. So this is a very good example that you can give a set of maybe leaves which are good versus the leaf which are infected with pest, and then give it as an input to the machine learning model, and it would. The good thing about this is you can export this model directly into your TensorFlow, and you'll get the source code and directly use it in your application as such. So this was an example of how people can actually use it for like classification of maybe rotten and good papayas. You can also go to, in fact, in India itself, data.gov.in gives you a lot of sources of agriculture data sources. I said. So you can take some data sources from there if you want to work on this. And there is another data source which is there at data.world, which would help you to like work on to machine learning models. So those are the two demos I just wanted to show you.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Sir, for the classification of papaya, You have uploaded 70 images of fresh papaya and 102 images of rotten papaya.
Yes, correct.
So means in the supervised machine learning, it gives the answer after uploading so many images, or it can identify only 5 or 6 images of the same.
So as you see, like generally the good quality of data is very important in machine learning. So more data you have, it's always better, so that it can then extract the right, or we can extract the right features and predict it better actually. The advantage of machine learning is with very decent data, you can actually do the analysis. At least some tens of data you can have. In fact, if you see my data set over here, apart from the papayas, I had purposefully put some data here. You see arrow on and then download, which is not related to papaya at all. Just to see that how the model works actually, how does it respond to it actually. So as you rightly said, with less data, you sometimes it may work, sometimes it may not. It totally depends on the data. Like for example, if I always have red color apples and oranges with yellow color, my machine learning model will always work because I take color as a feature there, right? So only few models may or few input samples may help me actually. But if it is a large data wherein there is a little bit variations between it, then it is tough for the model. So you will have to feed it with more data actually.
Okay,
And
sir.
also the data has to be balanced actually. So it's always good to have, like in this case, one was 70 and another was 100, I guess actually. So that's a decent balance actually. But you cannot have 10 rotten samples and 200 good samples. Then there are chances that it might not learn better about the rotten samples because you have less number of samples in the data.
Thank you.
Closing session. So thank you very much, madam, for participating and providing inputs on the blockchain technology and artificial intelligence, AL and machine learning tools.